The shit is wicked on these mean streets, mean streets.
Dear God, I wonder, can you save me?
Family is everything in the game. It's how La Cosa Nostra, the Mafia, stayed on top of the New York underworld for decades, ruling the streets. But in this world, family ain't always enough when greed starts circling like vultures. The Zotola family knows this all too well. They're tight, tighter than most because they have to be. Sylvester, the father, and his sons Salvatore and Anthony walk the line between the criminal world and the one above, working both sides to stay ahead. Law enforcement's got Sylvester tagged as an associate of the Bonanno and Lucchese families. And when you're dealing with powerhouses like those, you need to roll deep, present a united front. The Zotolas all live near each other, locked in a compound in Locust Point, the Bronx. Nestled next to the Locust Point Yacht Club, the spot's known as Zottola's Court. You'll see two plaques on the homes. One reads, "Our foundation is built from love. Our strength keeps us together." While the other says, "Our walls are built thick. Our love for each other is thicker." In short, if anyone thought they could roll up and take what's theirs, they'd soon find out there's a price to pay. The Zotolas weren't just flexing for show. They had plenty worth holding on to. Sylvester wasn't just hustling on the streets. He was deep in illegal gambling, running those Joker poker video games for the New York mob. These machines were strategically placed in everything from social clubs to bodegas to coffee shops, raking in cash by the hundreds of thousands every week. Sylvester wasn't just collecting money. He was flipping that dirty cash into something bigger, real estate. Over time, his investments grew into a $45 million empire in the Bronx. His portfolio, multifamily rental properties that kept the money flowing. Anthony, Sylvester's son, was more than just a bystander in the family hustle. He was in the trenches, helping manage the properties, collecting rent, and running A&S Maintenance, a company co-owned by him and his brother Salvatore. With their ties to the Mafia, the Zotolas were protected. Nobody could touch them without dealing with the full force of La Cosa Nostra. But Sylvester wasn't just relying on standard Mafia protection. He had major clout with Bonanno crime family boss Vincent "Vinny Gorgeous" Bashan. This man was known for his sharp intellect, his charm, and his cold ability to eliminate anyone who got in his way. Having Bashan as a close associate wasn't just an insurance policy, it was a damn fortress. It placed an invisible yet unbreakable layer of protection around the Zotola family, making sure no one dared to challenge their empire. Imagine the shock that hit Sylvester Zottola when, out of nowhere, a group of unknown attackers set their sights on him. One minute he's just going about his business, and the next he's being jumped. They beat him mercilessly, leaving him bruised and bloodied. But that was just the beginning of what would become a chilling series of events. On December 27th, 2017, only days after Christmas, things take a far darker turn. 3 men break into Sylvester's home with the kind of brutality you only see in the movies. They slam him in the head with a gun, stab him multiple times, and slash his throat open like it's nothing. They leave him for dead, convinced he's a goner. But Sylvester's tougher than that. He survives. Call it a Christmas miracle. But there's no joy in this story, only questions. His attackers vanish into the night, and the Zottola family is left wondering who the hell is behind the hit and why they've targeted their patriarch. By the summer of 2018, Sylvester's recovered and back on his grind. On June 12th, 2018, he's standing in front of one of his properties in the Bronx when he notices a suspicious figure across the street. This guy's moving too slow and too deliberate, and before Sylvester knows it, the situation turns deadly. He's face to face with a hitman, and this time there's no mistaking it. This man is there to finish the job. The hitman's got a gun drawn, and the only thing between him and Sylvester is a few feet of concrete. But Sylvester's not some easy target. He shouts, "Don't come any closer!" And in one smooth motion pulls his own piece. He unloads several shots, and the hitman tries to return fire, but his gun jams. It's like a scene out of an action flick. The hitman scrambles, running back to the getaway car where the driver's waiting, eager to peel out. Both men are arrested shortly after the botched attempt. It turns out they're Ron Cabey and Heman Ross, known gangsters with deep ties to the Bloods. At least now the Zottolas have a name. But it's still far from clear why the Bloods have set their sights on Sylvester. The family scrambles to figure out who's pulling the strings behind the attacks. But just when they think they might have time to regroup and put out some feelers on the streets, they're hit again. Another wave of violence comes crashing down on them, leaving the family more uncertain than ever about who's trying to take them out and why. On July 11th, 2018, Salvatore Zottola had just stepped out of his minivan in front of his house in Locust Point when a car with New Jersey plates cruised by. Before he even had time to react, the passenger side window rolled down, and the gunman started unloading rounds. Salvatore takes a hit to the chest, dropping to the ground and rolling behind the van for cover. But the hitman isn't rattled. He steps out of the car with his arms fully extended, his gun trained on Salvatore. The guy's calm as hell, not missing a beat as Salvatore scrambles, doing everything he can to dodge the barrage of bullets. The hitman moves in closer, determined to finish the job. One of the bullets grazes Salvatore's head, skimming his skull but not breaking through. The impact is so hard it knocks him into another state of shock. It was like lights out, Salvatore recalls. I tried standing, but I couldn't. I fell to the curb. I couldn't run. Rolling was the best I could do. His friends and a relative yell at him to stay down, knowing the situation's still hot. Salvatore, barely clinging to consciousness, gives them instructions. He tells them to grab $1,200 in cash stashed in his sock so the assassins can't get their hands on it. Then, with all the strength he can muster, he tells them to relay a final message to his loved ones. Tell my wife, my kids, and my father that I love them. Miraculously, despite taking 7 bullets, one to the head, another to the chest, and one more to his hand, Salvatore Zottola somehow manages to survive. Much like his father Sylvester, who survived a brutal stabbing and slashing, Salvatore beats the odds once again. While he's recovering in the hospital, he's surrounded by the love and concern of his family. But there's a catch. His brother Anthony can't make it. I've got a soccer game with my kids, he says, brushing off the gravity of the situation. But even with the family gathered around, one question hangs heavy in the air. Who's behind these attacks? After his recovery, Salvatore sits down with Anthony, asking him if he has any idea where all of this is coming from. He didn't know either, Salvatore says later, his voice laced with confusion. The Zotolas are completely clueless, unable to pinpoint who wants them gone or why. After everything that's happened, they continue moving through the city as if nothing's changed. They don't put up any extra precautions, no added security, no increased awareness. It's almost like they're living in denial, but maybe there's more to it. Perhaps this is because, despite their connections to the criminal world, they're not really in the middle of the violence that's usually associated with organized crime. They're players on the money-making side of things, running their businesses and investments and staying out of the bloodshed. They're not made men, just associates, operating in the shadows, but never truly at the forefront of the action. They've built their empire on real estate and gambling, not on the brutality and the day-to-day crime that defines the core of La Cosa Nostra. Still, it doesn't matter. Whoever's gunning for them doesn't care about those distinctions. They're still going after the Zotolas, regardless of how deep into the game they are or how far they've stayed from the violence. 71-year-old Sylvester Zottola was just trying to grab a coffee. A simple, everyday routine. He orders a medium at the McDonald's drive-thru on Webster Avenue in the Bronx on October 4th, 2018. It was around 5 p.m., just another evening, or so it seemed. As he waited in his SUV, things quickly took a deadly turn. Another car pulled up and blocked him in. Before he could react, a second car blocked the other side, trapping him. A man got out, walked up to his vehicle, and fired 5 quick shots through the car window. Zottola took shots to the head, chest, and shoulder. He was gone before he could even process what happened. The hitman fled the scene immediately. In the aftermath, rumors swirled like wildfire about who might have ordered the hit. One group with the capability and motive to execute such a cold, calculated murder was the Albanian Mafia. The Albanians had a strong presence in the Bronx, and they were also in on the Joker poker racket, the very business Sylvester was involved in. Could they have been the ones behind all this violence? A week later, the investigation intensified as authorities closed in on a suspect. Enter Bashan Shelton, a former inmate with a checkered past. He was arrested and charged with murder for hire conspiracy and the murder for hire of Sylvester Zottola, as well as the earlier attempt on Salvatore's life. Shelton wasn't a stranger to trouble. He'd done 3 years for criminal possession of a weapon after cops found a .38 caliber handgun in his Lincoln Navigator. After being released in 2012, Shelton aimed to make a name for himself. By 2018, he had risen through the ranks and was leading a BLOODS gang of 30 members. He wasn't just looking for street credibility, he was eyeing bigger paydays, specifically in the business of killing mobsters. And it seemed like he found his target in the Zotola family, with the McDonald's hit being just the beginning of his deadly ambitions. A week after Sylvester Zottola's murder, investigators closed in on Bashan Shelton. How did they catch him so quickly? The hit squad had made a critical mistake. They used a GPS device to track Sylvester's movements. They'd hidden it under his car, but in their haste to flee, they forgot to remove it. The FBI agents recovered the device and scrolled through the locations it had recorded. It had been activated days before the murder, on September 29th, at an unknown address. Surveillance footage from that location revealed 5 members of the BLOODS gang coming and going throughout the day. The heat was on, but it didn't stop there. Remember Ron Caby, the wannabe hitman whose gun jammed during the attempt on Sylvester's life? He was ready to talk. Caby confessed to police that Shelton had recruited him after he got out of jail. Shelton promised him $10,000 to kill Sylvester, and Caby failed at least 6 times to carry out the hits in 2018. He used 4 different getaway drivers, but each time he came up short. The final piece of the puzzle came when Shelton's DNA was found at the scene of an attempted murder. On November 26, 2017, a van had forced Sylvester's car off the road. A masked man emerged with a gun, but Shelton's DNA was recovered from the mask the assailant had worn. The case was closing in fast. In addition to Shelton, investigators also charged several other gang members: Heman Ross, Herman Taliban Blanco, Arthur Fetty Boss God Codner, and Caleb McFarlane, all for murder conspiracy. The police weren't done yet. More gang members would be indicted as the investigation continued. But the question still loomed. Why was the BLOODS gang targeting the Zotolas? What beef could they possibly have with the family? Were they after power, or were they working with the Albanian Mafia? The shocking answer came when investigators uncovered a series of text messages on Shelton's phone. One of them was to the person who had ordered the hits. Shelton texted, "Can we party today or tomorrow?" The response came from the other end. "Tomorrow, it's my little man's B-day. I'm taking him to his favorite place, McDonald's, then to a movie. LOL, like I eat that stuff." When investigators saw who the texts were between, they were stunned. The person on the other end wasn't some rival gang leader. It was Anthony Zottola, Sylvester's own son. He had orchestrated his father's murder. Anthony had also planned the shooting of his own brother Salvatore. Over 1,000 text messages between Shelton and Anthony Zottola were discovered. They discussed threats and attacks on Sylvester and Salvatore, planning the violence for more than a year before Sylvester was finally killed. After the murder of his father, Anthony even discussed payment for the hit. "I have the cases of water in a day or so," he texted Shelton. The chilling photo later recovered from Shelton's phone showed a cardboard box of bottled water with over $200,000 in banded cash stacked alongside it. The truth hit harder than any bullet. Anthony Zottola wasn't just a victim in the family feud. He was the mastermind behind it all. On June 18, 2019, the full weight of the investigation came crashing down on Anthony Zottola. Prosecutors indicted him, charging him with ordering the murder of his father, Sylvester, and the attempted murder of his brother, Salvatore. Anthony, however, pleaded not guilty, adamantly denying any involvement in the brutal acts that had rocked his family. But as the case began to unfold, it quickly became clear that his world was crumbling around him. While Anthony clung to his innocence, many of his alleged partners in crime weren't so willing to risk a trial. Among them was 38-year-old BLOODS gang boss Bashan Shelton. With his DNA found at crime scenes, Caby's testimony implicating him, and over 1,000 damning text messages exchanged with Anthony, Shelton had little chance of walking away free. The final nail in his coffin was the $45,000 in cash and a loaded handgun the FBI found at his Brooklyn home. His grandmother even told authorities that he came into that money very recently, linking it directly to the murder of Sylvester. Shelton wasn't about to gamble with his fate. In August 2022, he pled guilty. Along with Shelton, several other co-conspirators also chose to plead guilty. Herman Taliban Blanco, Arthur Fetty Boss God Codner, Jason Cummings, and Brandon Peterson all pled guilty to their roles in the plot. Their sentences ranged from 16 to 20 years in prison, sealing their fates while they left Anthony to fend for himself in court. Anthony, however, didn't have the luxury of taking a plea deal. The stakes were too high. The charges against him were too severe. If convicted, he wouldn't just lose his freedom. He would be forever branded as the ultimate betrayer in the underworld, where family is everything. La Cosa Nostra values loyalty above all else, and the idea of a son orchestrating the murder of his own father was beyond contempt. So, Anthony went to trial. He stood alongside 37-year-old Heman Ross, who was accused of being the triggerman in the murder of Sylvester, and Alfred Lopez, the alleged getaway driver. Anthony's defense team mounted a vigorous argument, suggesting that there were many other potential enemies who could have wanted Sylvester dead. They pointed fingers at the Albanian Mafia, claiming that they sought to take over Sylvester's lucrative Joker poker operations. They also argued that the BLOODS gang had gotten involved, sensing an opportunity to take over the empire. Their implication was clear. Anthony wasn't the mastermind. He wasn't the one who wanted his family gone. But the prosecution wasn't having any of it. They were resolute in their belief that Anthony was the orchestrator of the entire plot. The evidence was overwhelming, they argued. Anthony had a clear motive to eliminate his father and brother, the $45 million real estate empire Sylvester had built. He stood to inherit it all, and that's exactly what he wanted. It wasn't about some gang war or turf battle. It was about family betrayal, greed, and a son's ruthless ambition to take what wasn't his yet. As the trial unfolded, it became evident that the prosecution had the upper hand. The messages, the testimonies, the financial transactions, it all pointed to Anthony. Despite his lawyer's efforts to paint him as an innocent man caught in the crossfire of a larger conflict, it was hard to ignore the reality. Anthony had used his own blood to climb the ladder of his father's empire, and in the world of organized crime, that kind of betrayal doesn't go unnoticed. The courtroom was tense as the final moments of the trial approached. The evidence against Anthony Zottola seemed insurmountable. Prosecutors meticulously detailed the role he had played in the ruthless plot to eliminate his own father and brother, all for the sake of greed. They pointed to the damning text messages between Anthony and Bashan Shelton, where plans for the murder were laid out in cold, calculated words. The prosecutor addressed the jury with piercing clarity. The texts are not just evidence of the crime, they are the crime. The texts are conspiracy in action. Those words would echo in the minds of everyone present, as it was clear that Anthony had orchestrated this violence from the shadows, using Shelton and his BLOODS gang to carry out the dirty work while he kept his hands clean. The jury deliberated, and on October 19th, 2022, the verdict was delivered. Alfred Lopez, the getaway driver, was acquitted, but Heman Ross, the triggerman, was found guilty of shooting Sylvester Zottola dead. The biggest blow came for Anthony, who was convicted of the murder-for-hire plot against his father and the attempted hit on his brother, Salvatore. The courtroom was filled with emotion as the verdict was read. Anthony's wife could be heard sobbing uncontrollably, the weight of her husband's betrayal hitting her hard. She was consoled by her brother-in-law, Salvatore, the very man her husband had tried to have killed. Salvatore had testified against Anthony after being granted immunity, and in that moment it seemed the weight of everything that had happened settled upon him. Salvatore's sister, trying to make sense of the overwhelming heartbreak, spoke to reporters, her voice breaking. "I remember my brother for the man that he was. I remember my father for the man he was. I was looking at both of my brothers during the verdict. What I felt was heartbreak." It was a tragic moment, one that encapsulated the destruction of a family at the hands of its own. Then came the sentencing. On April 14th, 2023, Anthony Zottola and Heman Ross were sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 112 years. The sentencing was symbolic in its calculation, representing the ages of father and son at the time of their attacks. Sylvester was 71 when he was murdered, and Salvatore was 41 when he was shot. Anthony's fate was sealed. He was 45 years old, and now he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The sentence was a bitter reminder of the consequences of his greed, a greed that had driven him to betray his own blood, destroy his family, and sacrifice his freedom for the promise of something he could never truly possess. In the end, it wasn't just a family torn apart by violence, it was a life ruined by ambition, by a desire to inherit something he wasn't willing to earn. The Zotola empire, once built on hard work and years of effort, was now marred by betrayal and murder. One son willing to destroy everything for his own gain, and the others caught in the fallout of a senseless plan that ultimately cost them all.
The shit is wicked on these mean streets, mean streets.